Hello and welcome back. In this lesson we're going to look at CSS text, both the appearance of the text, things like fonts, color and size, as well as the layout on the page. So as you can see, to save you watch me typing, I've created this HTML page, and it's essentially an ordered list. That's what OL means. And each list item displays one particular effect. And you can see I've got 19 of them down here. So we'll work our way through them. The way the list has been built is that each list item has a title up here and then a paragraph, and the paragraph demonstrates one particular effect. So here you can see I've set the inline style. I'm demonstrating the color property. Here I'm setting it to blue. And then I've repeated that in the actual text content so that the text and the effect match up. So we've spoken before about color, so I'm not going to address that here. And we'll start on the second one, font family. So the way the font family property works is you provide it with a list of fonts, and the browser that's rendering the HTML will work its way down the list of fonts, looking to see if each one's installed in turn. And when it finds one, it'll render the text in that font. Generally, you put a font family at the end. There are 6 font families guaranteed to be present, which I've listed here. And if none of the specific fonts are available, then it'll default back to this font family. And so what's going to happen here is the browser will look to see whether Arial is installed, and if not, it'll just install a generic sans serif font. Incidentally, I've also laid this particular paragraph out with some line breaks. These BR things here are line breaks, and you can see the effect over here. And also I've indented the text a little bit using what are called non-breaking spaces, which is this little character sequence here, starting with an and or an ampersand and ending with a semicolon, and NBSP is non-breaking space. So moving on to the next, so that's the font size. Up until now we've been specifying our font sizes in pixels, but you can also use what are called M units. So here you can see I've specified 1M and 1.5M, and at present these are the same as 16 pixels and 24 pixels, as you can see over here. And that's because the default font size for this HTML page is currently 16 pixels, so 1em means whatever the default font size of the parent is. So we can go and change that. If I change it for the body, it'll sort of ripple through for everything else. So let's go to body here and say font size. To start with, I'll say 16, and we should see no difference because that's what it was by default anyway. But if I change this down to 8 pixels, you'll see immediately quite a dramatic change. And here we can see the font sizes that have been specified in pixels just remain exactly as they were, whereas the other font sizes have now dramatically reduced. And this, you probably can't even read it as saying font size 1em. It's now in 8 pixels size. Font size 1.5em is 12 pixels size. So I'll remove this for now, but hopefully it's clear what's going on. Generally, the idea of M units is that if you specify everything in M units rather than pixels, then merely by making a change to the default font size, everything will scale together. Okay, so font weight is essentially boldness. You can see what's going on here. You can specify a font weight of normal or bold, but there are numbers as well. If I can get Visual Studio to show us down here, font weight, colon, normal. If I remove the colon normal and then type a colon, it'll prompt me with its IntelliSense as to the various different values. And we can see there's 100, 200, all the way up to 900, as well as a few words like bold, bolder, lighter, and normal. I'll just put this back to normal for now. So over here we can see that normal is 400 and bold is 700, but it's worth knowing there are other values available. So generally when a font is designed, the font designer will provide an italic version of the font as well, and this can be selected with font style. But if the font doesn't provide an italic version, font style oblique will essentially try to manufacture one algorithmically. All it does is it takes the normal font and it will sort of slope it. But in some cases an oblique font is actually supplied, and I don't honestly know here, but if I just expand this a bit, if you look at the words font style, they're pretty identical. I suspect the font that we're using here does actually have an oblique version. But if the font doesn't have an italic version, using oblique will try to make a fake italic version of the normal font. Okay, so here we can see text decoration. It can be used for underlining and striking a line through. I think this is often used in sort of legal documents where you want to strike things out. And similarly, text transform can be used to make the text capitalize each letter or entirely uppercase. And there is also a font variant, small caps, which does a similar thing, just makes everything into small capitals as opposed to fully uppercase. Shadow text is interesting. The value actually consists of 4 individual values. So you basically need to know what these are. The first one is how much the text is shifted to the right, and the second one is how much it's shifted down. The third one is a degree of blurring, so 0 would be no blurring. And finally, grey is the colour of the shadow text. So this is easiest to see if I perhaps just here make the font size 24, a little bit bigger, and then I make the blurring 0 just for a moment and the colour black. And you should see quite clearly what's going on. So you can see there's now a second copy of the text. It's being shifted 2 pixels. In fact, why don't we make this 4? And 4 down to make it really clear what's going on. So we can now see, if you look at this W, it's been shifted 2 to the right, 2 down. There's 0 blurring and the colour is black. So if I slowly revert that, if I go back to grey, you can see how the colour is now softer. And if I put the blurring in, 4 pixels of a blur radius, and now you can see there's a much softer shadow, and then I'll return these to 2, so it's much closer. And then finally I'll just revert the text back to the usual size. So you can see it's a very soft effect now. Okay, letter spacing, word spacing and line spacing are all fairly self-evident. Here's some letter spacing of 3 pixels, word spacing of 10 pixels, so you can see 10 pixels between individual words, and a line height of 2 is leaving a gap between the individual lines. Now, in the previous lesson, we saw how an item can be centered by setting its left margin and right margin within a container. Well, that applies to HTML elements, but a paragraph element can contain text, and the text itself isn't technically an element, it's just free-flowing text. So we can't use that technique we learned in the previous lesson to center text. So instead, text has its own property, which is called text align. And as you can see, it has 3 possible values, left, center, and right, which will align it left, center, and right. There's actually a 4th property called justify, which uses an algorithm to generate spacing so that the left and right hand sides of the paragraph are lined up. The last properties are to do with wrapping text. Normally text, as you can see in this paragraph here, is just wrapped around, and the height is varied in order to accommodate the text. But we can stop that happening. We can use a property called white space and set it to no wrap. And in that case, the text will just continue on a single line. I've sort of broken the rule here a bit by using a break In fact, let me just take it out so you can see. Here we are. So now it's just a single line. And this is often used in conjunction with a second property called overflow. And again, I'll take these two breaks out this time so you can see precisely what happens. So you can see that now we guarantee that there's a single line and it's truncated so that it doesn't overflow outside of the paragraph itself. So this is essentially a good way of controlling the height of the paragraph and not allowing long text to make the paragraph grow. And finally, we can use those two properties with a third property. So here we've got white space no wrap, overflow is hidden, and text overflow ellipsis. And the effect is that instead of the text ending abruptly like it did in this example here, a little ellipsis is inserted by the right hand side in order to indicate that the text has been truncated. So with that, I will bring this lesson to a close and I will see you in the next.